Well, good morning, and welcome to the First Parish Church of Stowe and Acton, a welcoming and spiritual community. My name is Ruth Lull, and I serve on the board at FPC. For those visiting FPC for the first time, we welcome you. Please let us know you were here by filling out one of our visitor information cards in the pews and hand it to an usher or drop it in the plate. Our minister, staff, and board are listed on the front of the order of service. Please feel free to ask me or any of those people for more information. If you would like a large print order of service or hymnal or an assisted living device, please ask our ushers. Our assisted living devices are small radios. Anyone is welcome to use one of those to listen to the service from another space or in or around our building. Nursery care is available during the service. For K through 5 children usually attend the first part of the service and then leave for classes. Once a month, we have a children's chapel where children begin their time in the community room. For youth programming and other information, see the bulletin or ask our religious education director or an usher. After the service, please join us for coffee and conversation in our fellowship hall, which is down the stairs or elevator at the other end of our building, or in a breakout room if you're joining us online. I'd like to draw your attention to the announcements in our order of service and also invite you to check out our webpage where you can sign up for our newsletter and email alerts. And also, I believe at 11:30, sort of after coffee hour, we're having a discussion about naming choosing a new name for the church. And now let's come together for a time of community, singing, and worship.
Our opening words come to us through 4 prophetic voices. The first, the voice of Harriet Tubman. I have heard their groans and sighs and seen their tears, and I would give them every drop of blood in my veins to free them. Next, the voice from the book of Micah, chapter 6, verse 8. The Holy has told you, O mortal, what is good, and what does the Eternal require of you, but to do justice, and to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God. The voice of Frederic Douglass. I prefer to be true to myself, even at the hazard of incurring the ridicule of others, rather than to be false and incur my own abhorrence. And lastly, the voice from the book of Esther, chapter 4, verse 14. And who knows, perhaps you have attained such a privileged position for just such a time as this. And now Susie O'Brien will light our chalice. Our opening hymn is hymn number 1 in your gray hymnals, written for such a time as this. May nothing evil cross this door. Please rise in body or in spirit.
Peace.
standing for the covenant and affirmation. Love is the spirit of this church, and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Our land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that we are on the unceded territories of the Massachusetts, Nipmuc, Pawtucket, and Wampanoag people, as well as honoring and recognizing the Black and African people whose unpaid and forced labor built this country and our state. We celebrate and work in solidarity with Black, Indigenous, and people of color organizations, leading the movement for our collective liberation in line with our UU values. And I believe it's now time to greet your neighbor.
Good morning. Today we are going to talk about the definition of two different words. The first word is the word defund. Do any of you know what that means? Okay. It means to stop paying for something or to pay less for something. Is this a good or a bad word? You don't know, right? It's a word, right? And words are just what? Words. Our second word is the word help. Is help a good or bad word? You think it's a good word? Does everybody agree with them? Okay, I'm going to tell you a story about Little Red Riding Hood and the three bears. So, Little Red Riding Hood was on their way to their grandparents' house to have dinner. They were going to make a big dinner and spend time together and have fun. So, Little Red Riding Hood said, you know what? Instead of us going to the store and getting all our groceries like we planned, I'm going to just bring them with me. So Little Red Riding Hood grabs their groceries, and they go off to the grandparents' house. The first bear stops Little Red Riding Hood and says, those bags look kind of heavy. I see in one bag you have carrots and lettuce. I think there's some eggplant in there. Eggplants are heavy. Why don't I help you carry that bag? Oh, Little Red Riding Hood said, that's so nice of you. So the bear takes the bag and Little Red Riding Hood said, you are so helpful. I appreciate the help that you're giving me and carrying this bag. And the bear says, you're welcome, and turns around and walks off with the bag. Little Red Riding Hood says, well, I guess we won't have a salad and we won't have some eggplant, but I still have 2 more bags of things, and it'll be okay. Little Red Riding Hood keeps walking and comes across the second bear. The second bear says, those bags look kind of heavy. Little Red Riding Hood said, they are. Oh, what's in that bag? Looks like different kind of meat that you have. Ooh, look at those spices. I think sometimes spices make us sneeze, and I want to help you out. So I'll carry that bag for you. And Little Red Riding Hood said, oh, thank you so much for the help. The bear takes the bag, turns around, and off they go. Well, I guess we'll just have dessert. Dessert for dinner is good, right? Do you all want dessert for dinner? Oh, no, it's not. All you want is what? All you want is dessert? His sister wanted candy for breakfast. That's what we got out of that. So Little Red Riding Hood keeps walking. Another bear comes by and says, ooh, I see in that bag you have sugar and flour and vanilla and all kind of things to make some baked goods. Flour is very, very heavy. And Little Red Riding Hood said, yes, it is. How about I help you out and I'll carry that bag for you? Little Red Riding Hood said, oh, thank you so much. So they give the bear the bag and off the bear goes. So now, what does Little Red Riding Hood have? Nothing. So Little Red Riding Hood gets to the grandparents' house, and one grandparent says, oh, glad you're here. We can now go to the store and have a grand adventure shopping. The other grandparent says, it really would have saved time if you had bought some groceries. That would have been helpful, right? We could have just started cooking and spent some great time together. The other grandparent said, it's more helpful if they go shopping with us, because then we can spend time picking out exactly what everybody wants, right? They were trying to trick her. Yeah. But do you think it was nice of Little Red Riding Hood to go to her grandparents' house to help them cook dinner and make dessert? Yeah. So is this word a good or bad word? Yeah, right. It's just the word help. So this is what? Just a word, right? The word help. And this is a word what? Defend. Just a word. Yes, defend. What matters is defending somebody. Oh, what did I say? Defend? Oh, thank you. Defund. Thank you. So what matters is the meaning that we give to these words, right? So right now, some adults are very concerned about how people are using that word. But it is just what? A word. So before we go off, I do want to, I won't tell you that. So I do want to tell you about what's going to happen in the nursery, because some of you were asking William about ducks. Yeah, because you all want more ducks. Yeah, okay, well, the nursery never got ducks, and the nursery kids were angry. So today, you all don't get ducks, but your siblings who are younger than you will get ducks. So be nice when they have the ducks, right? Huh? You don't have a sibling? Oh. Okay, well, we'll still have controversy with the ducks. Thought I was solving it, but I guess I'm not. Oh, gosh. Ida, are you ready to come light our chalice? With Mommy's help?
We've come to the time in our service where we share with one another our deepest joys and our sorrows so that we may hold one another in that love that we center together in this place.
Good morning. I'm Ingrid Holcomb. Good to see you all. I am one of the lay ministers here at FPC. I think we're going to need one more mic for Rick, if there is one. As you might know, our tradition is that if you have a joy or sorrow that you'd like one of the lay ministers to speak on your behalf, you can contact us in email in the week, and we'll be happy to read it for you. This week we got one.
We light one final candle for those joys and sorrows that are left unspoken. And right now, our hearts are heavy, even more so with this candle we light every week now for the ongoing personal, human, financial, earthly toll to the cost of war.
For this morning's prayer or meditation, I've chosen a poem I wrote in August of last year. I invite you into a spirit of prayer or meditation. The name of this is Flowing Freely. They built it out of cold, out of steel and fluorescent light, out of concrete floors that echo the sounds of weeping mothers, out of policies written to instill fear. They called it security, said it was for our well-being, as if the border were skin and compassion a disease to be cured. But I have seen what they keep inside, dreams locked behind chain link, toddlers learning the taste of trauma, fathers staring at floors that will never be home. ICE, ICE. This is no accident of language, no harmless acronym. It is cold by design, a frost that spreads across the heart, freezing every tender thing it touches. But here is what I know. No frost lasts forever, not when the sun of human dignity rises, not when love burns hotter than fear. We will ignite together 1,000 small fires, candles, kitchen stoves, vigils that will never end, our warmth seeping through every crack until even this monstrous ice begins to weep and run into the earth it tried to harden. And when it is gone, melted into memory, we will plant gardens where the cages stood. Children will run between the rows, their laughter louder than the fence's meaning ever was. Never again. Not here, not anywhere, because love will not rest until every cage is torn open and the frost burn in every system is turned back to living water flowing freely. Let us be in a spirit of prayer and meditation in silence. I now invite us into a spirit of prayer or meditation in song.
This song is being sung this Wednesday by Boston Voices of Community and Labor. They're inviting Unitarian Universalist churches and choirs and congregants to join at Boston City Hall at 4 p.m. If you are interested in doing that, we just need to designate a point person who can get the instructions for the day. So speak to me or Trek after the service.
Morning, folks.
Good morning.
3 years ago, I was elected to the UUA's Commission on Social Witness by the General Assembly body of delegates from congregations. Microphone closer. It's on, but closer. Yeah, there we go. So 3 years ago, I was elected to the UUA's Commission on Social Witness. The Commission on Social Witness guides the social justice process of our General Assembly, the gathered body of delegates from all UU congregations across this country, and one in Mexico, served by your Minister Emeritus, Reverend Tom. We decided to revitalize a process that had gone defunct of congregational study action issues. The UUA votes every year on actions of immediate witness. These are things that we know we want to take action on that are happening in the world right now, that we've long had stands on and believe in strongly. But every 3 years, we vote on something we're not as sure about, a congregational study action issue. This is something that we aren't certain about as a faith, and we think we need to study more deeply. So 3 CSAIs were proposed last year. One on fat liberation, which I had encouraged my fat colleagues to put forward. One on housing and the housing crisis in America. And one on abolition. And we voted. And housing won, and abolition was second, and fat liberation was third. But there was a problem with the vote. We hadn't done it the way we said we would. We let people speak longer on one issue than on the others, and we had them speak in a different order than they were told they were going to do, and there were even more problems with the vote than that. So we voted as a General Assembly to redo the vote, and then the next day we redid the vote. Between the vote to redo the vote and the redoing of the vote, I went to work. I made a big statement on social media about what is a congregational study action issue, because we hadn't done one for a long time as a faith, that this is something we want to study. This is something we're not sure about as a faith. This is something maybe we're divided about or just need more education on. And then I talked with my fat liberation friends, and I said, hey, we came in third, and we'll be speaking first. So let's use our time deliberately. Let's use it to educate the General Assembly on what a study action issue is. That what we vote for is what we understand least, not what we agree with most. And so they did. Person after person got up and educated the General Assembly on this issue. And they explained why they needed to study fat liberation in a faith that has made zero statements about it, and where fat phobia exists all around. And they explained what a study action issue is. Study what we need to study, not what we're already good at. And then the abolition speakers got up and they used the microphone the same way. I had talked to some of them also, but they also just saw what needed to be done and they did it. Study what we need to study. And then we cast our vote. And the vote changed dramatically. I voted the second time the same way I voted the first time. I vote as a minister of this congregation. I'm given an automatic vote as your called minister. So I always vote with that in mind. So I did not vote for fat liberation, despite the fact I wanted it very much on the ballot. I believe in it. I understand it. I think my congregation understands it too, am I right? Yeah. So I don't think we need to study it. I think our faith does need to study it, but I don't and you don't. So I voted for what I need to study most, and I voted what I think we are most divided on and least educated on, where we can do some real study, and I voted for abolition. And so I've been learning this year. One of the things I've learned is the difference between big A and little a abolition, as my fellow CSW Commissioner Antoinette Scully did a great video on that I'll send you the link for later today. Big A abolition is abolition of a particular structure. Today, often we're talking about the prison industrial complex. And today, Trek will talk about the big A abolition of ICE and the detention facility system. Little a abolition is about meeting everyone's basic needs and dismantling the whole capital system of punishment through building a world where everyone can thrive, and doing that through our own individual practices. Even our spiritual practice is in a day-to-day way. An analogy is environmentalism, starting with what you can do, starting with recycling, starting with I'm carpooling to this, etc., before you go to tear down the factories. So when you hear this sermon today, I want you to hear it with this in mind, that we're presenting on this today because this is a learning and studying issue for our faith, where we need to start with the study and then move on when we're more well-versed in it into acting. And so not this year, but next year at General Assembly, we may see a vote about taking action. The second thing I want you to keep in mind is the free church tradition. Where we embody the free church tradition, you grant to your minister, your called minister in particular, the freedom of the pulpit. It's right there in my letter of agreement with you that you've called me to be your minister and you've given me the free pulpit, which means I should speak my conscience without fear of reprisal for my words, especially on something controversial. And you have freedom of the pew. That's the freedom to disagree, the freedom to believe I'm wrong, the freedom of belief that in this church tradition where I'm saying I don't have the true word of God that only I have access to, but where we acknowledge a respect for the learned ministry. And so, as your called minister, I hereby, officially and formally, but have already done so for this whole year, extend my free pulpit to this intern minister you see before you. Because he and I are in covenant and in a learned agreement, his ministry is an extension of mine. My pulpit is extended to him. So again, I ask you to listen today with your learning ears and your open spirit and your freedom of the pew to make your own decisions, but with the understanding that our faith, our beloved faith, calls us to learn and to move forward into the areas of our uncertainty, and has decided as a whole delegate body of congregations that of all the issues before us, the ones that we presented, and of the ones we presented, the one that deserves our most time and attention and our study right now is abolition. So thank you.
Our Unitarian Universalist congregations are self-supporting. Your gifts of time, talent, and treasure help sustain the independent Free Church. We also share our weekly offering, and this month we are sharing it with the Southeast India Project. You may donate by check made out to First Parish Church, online, or by text. Information in your order of service. In 2006, I was living in West Manchester, New Hampshire. My housemate was Lily Mesa, a Colombian immigrant from Bogota who had become a citizen of the United States. Living in West Manchester was interesting. I was in what was called at one point Little Notre Dame. There were French diners, a Polish deli, a pan-South American bodega, and a Creole-style potluck third Thursdays at St. Marie's Catholic Parish on Notre Dame Avenue. Not to mention 2 pagan shops with everything you could need for your everyday New Age practice. It's a pretty eclectic neighborhood. I really liked it. Lily got me pretty involved in this neighborhood. She introduced me to so many incredible people. She told me that she wanted to run for state rep in this neighborhood. State representative in New Hampshire is a thing. There's 400 of them. She went for it and won, becoming one of only a handful of South American immigrants ever to serve in the 400-member New Hampshire legislature at that time. 2005 to 2007, President George W. Bush had begun wielding his newly formed Immigration and Customs Enforcement powers, ICE for short, around the country. Even back then, the White House and Department of Homeland Security, another power consolidation we don't have time to go into today, insisted that they were only going to go after the worst of the worst and dangerous criminals. We have heard this recently, too. Lily and I heard that some of our community members, who are not the worst of the worst in the least, that we were in relationship with in our neighborhood were being targeted by ICE for detention and possible deportation hearings. Sometimes one was brought in and immediately released on their own recognizance. Sometimes one was brought in and they were kept. Some were kept with bail and released, some without bail and, some were kept without bail and some on bail were released. This was a lot of money, so many of them weren't actually released unless we neighbors came together and paid for that kind of release. Even though this being held without bail thing was kind of rare even in those days, we considered that option the most inhumane. None of these people had the money to leave or escape what was happening to them. This, in fact, is where they escaped to. Local law enforcement at that time was working with ICE on a regular basis in Manchester, New Hampshire. Lily, myself, and a Mary Knoll sister, as well as a Franciscan friar among a handful of others, would regularly take turns hanging out with some of these folks in their homes. Occasionally, the reason for our being there would appear. This is U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and we'd like to speak with so-and-so J neighbor friend. I'm sorry, we're not sure where they are. May we come in? No. Who are you? I'm a friend of the family. And this went on for a few months. Eventually, it led to several of us being arrested by local police for refusing to let them in. We were never charged, there were never warrants, we were just arrested and whisked away. I do, however, recommend getting arrested with nuns. Our friends were mostly deported. Lily and I talked about how it could always be worse. Under President Barack Obama, the deportation machinery expanded more dramatically than under Bush, and families were detained in much larger numbers than this country had ever seen before, especially after 2014, when President Obama included in his detention mothers and children as a deterrent policy. Courts did finally stop the Obama administration in 2015 and 2016 with federal rulings under the Flores settlement limiting the government's ability to keep children and families locked up for long periods, forcing some pullback. But make no mistake, President Obama had to be reined in by the courts. And while he replaced the secure communities program, with a narrower program, those changes did not dismantle the system. They only trimmed parts of it. They tried to dress it up and make it look nice. The architecture, however, of detention, deportation, and fear was already in there, just waiting for someone with cruelty as their motive to use it more openly and more violently. We didn't have to wait very long. In President Donald J. Trump's first term, the cruelty was on full display. Who can forget the zero-tolerance policy which ripped children away from their parents? Children in cages, mylar blankets wrapped around them on concrete floors, begging for their parents. More than 4,000 children were ultimately identified and separated under this policy. President Joseph R. Biden gave us a complicated situation where he did some trimming away at the cruelty inherent in the first Trump-era policies, but ultimately not their impact. So while he softened the spectacle Trump made out of neighbors for sport, he didn't work to end the system itself. And now we are back with the most cruel president I have ever lived under in my entire life. A cruelty I never thought I would imagine experiencing. Which brings me to the story of Jose Diaz back in the May of 2025, a member of the Wakefield Unitarian Universalist Church, arrested by ICE while taking his daughter to swim lessons. This is a particular kind of obscenity, swim lessons. One of those ordinary parental things that says pretty clearly, we're trying to build a life here. We're raising our children. And into that everyday, ordinary life comes the state with its power to interrupt, seize, and disappear humans. This is part of what ICE does. It inserts terror into the most ordinary moments of our everyday family lives. It teaches parents and children alike that no errand is too small, no routine too ordinary, no day too regular to be shattered. Then came Minneapolis. What I saw there was mayhem unleashed. We shared most of that with you, so I won't rehash the whole thing. But fear was weaponized, power deployed again as spectacle. A city and its people trying to make sense of what is even happening around them. And then came the murder of Renee Good. And then came the clergy call to Minnesota. As you know, Rev. Cindy and I and over 1,000 others answered one of two clergy calls that went out from Minneapolis. Clergy answered that call, joining protest and civil disobedience at the Minneapolis airport, kneeling, singing, praying, and being arrested. The Associated Press and Reuters both reported clergy participation in those actions to a worldwide audience, to me proving the power of prophetic witness. And then we came home, and home was not any calmer. Home was Max of the Stowe Cafe being scooped up by ICE. His detention sent shock through Stowe because suddenly the machinery of ICE had a name and a face in this neighborhood. More and poor people who had previously been untouched personally now recognized. It was not an abstraction from somewhere else. It was our neighbor, a business owner, a person woven into the ordinary fabric of our community. We witnessed how his detention Cindy and I in particular, witnessed how his detention hit residents as deeply personal. Home was also Karen and John and their children, a family from Honduras seeking asylum, being summoned to the Burlington ICE facility. And as we know, Burlington has its own moral indictments that we have heard from witnesses who've been inside this place. The ICE field office has been condemned by lawmakers and advocates for detention conditions described as inhumane, unsanitary, and abysmal. Reports have described people held in an office building not meant for detention, with inadequate access to beds, hygiene, medical care, and counsel. Some of us here have witnessed there. Some of us have watched the mayhem outside that building unfold, where families get torn apart, children crying as cars pull away, leaving one or more parents or guardians behind in a building not made for detention or their hospitality, and with conditions that should feel embarrassing at the least and atrocious to all of us in these United States. Once you have seen that, the language to describe it starts to change. It becomes harder to say enforcement when what they mean is terrorizing. It's harder to say detention when what they mean is family separation. It's harder to say policy when what they mean is a child crying in a parking lot because someone they love is not coming back home with them tonight. The existence of ICE has always bothered me, all the way from its inception on March 1st, 2003. Perhaps in part because of my Jewish background and my family Holocaust history. Perhaps it was because I could see the racialized violence inherent in that system more publicly than a lot of the other systems. Daily here, more clearly than I could in almost any other part of the carceral state anyway. So when I say, abolish ICE, I want you to understand how I came to this conclusion. It wasn't something I picked up from a Twitter hashtag, nor a bandwagon I simply jumped on. To me, abolition is about telling the truth when a system's underlying logic is dehumanization. Abolition is what we call for when fear is governance. When family separation becomes administratively routine, when racialized suspicion becomes normalized, when human beings are turned into a file, a target, or a problem to be managed rather than a human being with their inherent worth and dignity. As Unitarian Universalists, that's our language for this. We center the inherent worth and dignity of every person, and we do it in love. Not every citizen, not every documented person, not every person who can prove themselves useful to a capitalist society, but every single human life, every person, every single one. We speak of justice and equity and centering love and compassion in our relationships with one another. We speak and try to live into the interdependent web of all existence. Fear does not stay in one family, one church, one office building, one city when it is used by our government like this. It teaches us and deforms us. It propagandizes a whole people into believing that some suffering is ordinary and some families are expendable, disposable even. This is why I do not think of abolition as merely some hot political take, but a deeply spiritual and moral orientation of the mind and spirit. As a spiritual practice, abolition becomes an invitation into a deeper relationship with what it means to be a human being. It is important to notice when we have become accustomed to what we otherwise would deem unacceptable. We are called to notice when outright lies of our present administration are hiding hard cruelties. It asks us to notice the ways domination politics shapes all of us, not only those being targeted by it. The detained are, of course, most directly harmed, but the rest of us are also being formed by what we tolerate. We are being shaped by whether we look away or not. We are being shaped by whether we still know how to hear the child crying in that parking lot. We are being shaped by whether we still believe that no one is disposable. My favorite verse in the Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible, I think I've shared before a few times, is Micah 6:8. Do justice, love kindness, walk humbly. It's all that is required of us mortals. Micah does not ask whether the state has followed procedure. Micah asks whether our common spiritual life bears the marks of justice and kindness and humility. Justice without kindness can become brutality. Kindness, in this case, is a translation of the Hebrew word chesed, which can also carry with it the meaning mercy. Humility means admitting that we may have been wrong about what justice and kindness and mercy should look like as a lived practice, as a national practice. On Thursday afternoon of the week, Reverend Cindy and I went to Minneapolis. The organizers of our clergy call, March, Multi-Faith, Anti-Racist Change and Healing, began handing out signs which read, do justice, love kindness, abolish ICE. I got chills. My Christian colleagues call this the conviction of the Spirit. In Judaism, we call it arevut, the concept of understanding suddenly, usually it's a sudden understanding, that we are responsible for one another. In these signs, I heard a prophetic reading of Micah for our times. Abolition then is not simply about getting rid of this system. It's a practice of rehumanizing one another, so we don't believe that these systems should exist. In Minneapolis at the end of January, I found myself in the middle of something that felt larger than anything I've ever been a part of. Yes, it was resistance. Yes, it was public grief and public outrage, but it was also an invitation into prophetic witness. While we clergy were in trainings or getting arrested or singing at the Target headquarters or attending to important pilgrimage sites of our murdered siblings, Renee Good and George Floyd, the residents of this city were on other sides surrounding hotels where ICE agents were staying. Imagine that. The residents were surrounding the hotels where the ICE agents were staying. And were they screaming at them? No. Were they hateful and angry? No. They were singing, we walk the same ground, but we were torn apart. Put down your weapons and sing your part. Wow. In a city that was occupied, they chose love as their witness that day. That is not only a demand to end the violence, it is a prophetic invitation back to their own humanity, to lay down the role that requires you to harm, to step out of the script of domination, to return to the human song. It is a universalist declaration that no one gets left behind and no one is disposable. That includes the ICE agents. It's a song yet even to all of us as we allow the government to be our weapon on our behalf too. We must lay down the role that requires us to believe harm is required to feel safe. We must step out of the script of domination too, to return to the human song, the one born in the great flaring forth 13.7 billion years ago, the one still echoing through the stars, through this earth, and through our very bones today. That is the work of our religion. The task of our faith is to wrestle with the deepest questions of how we live together. And then when conscience demands to declare with prophetic clarity the moral imperative before us. I do not expect everyone to agree with my conclusions or with my remedies for what ails us, though I do say with conviction, abolish ICE. But I do invite everyone into dialogue with your own sense of prophetic witness, especially in relationship with those most in need of our noticing. For just such a time as this, we are called to become a prophethood of believers, to do justice, to love kindness, and to accompany one another in divine cosmic humility toward love. Thank you. And with that, and with all of our hearts singing together, let us rise in body and spirit as we sing, Change is Coming. Change is coming, my beloveds, and we are a part of it. Yet the road seems long, the journey exhausting, but we can see the light. And so I say to you, hold on.